What a tragedy to serve that career, to give your time to that career, and if you do it in the wrong way, to go home to an empty house.
Welcome to the Heroes at Home podcast, where we believe heroes can thrive both at work and at home. This podcast is for those who stand watch while we sleep, who run into buildings while others run out, for those who deploy to hard places to have hard fights, and for the families that support them. Through candid conversation, we will discuss the side of things that don't get glorified in the media, what happens when they come home. We'll be talking with heroes from all walks of life and their partners, children, friends, and beyond, so together we can build a stronger family. I'm Noel Metter, CEO, joined by my co-host, Kenny Thomas. We are in for a treat today. Man, I'm so excited to have Mike and Anne Gagliano. Did I say it right? Did I get it right?
Not too shabby, baby.
Man, we're already off to a great start. But man, it's so good to have them. And I'm gonna throw this up here for our folks that are watching. They wrote this incredible book, Challenges of Firefighter Marriage. That's what we're gonna be talking about with them today. And I think if you're a firefighter, grab your spouse, pull them in. They need to be a part of this conversation. They need to hear what you're about to hear, because you guys really have done such an amazing job of capturing the elements of how do you make this thing work, the profession of a firefighter, and then the importance of a marriage. So maybe I can just start there and ask you guys this question. What are the unique challenges firefighters have in their marriage?
None.
We're done. Just, you know what? We can just call it quits.
Nice talking to y'all.
See you guys. Take care. Good job.
No,
You're amazing, Noel.
No, actually, that is the question that started us down this path. Probably about a little over 10 years, 12 years ago. Mike made captain for Seattle Fire, and he was chosen to be the training captain at that time. And so he was in the training center every day, and he was running into firefighters he hadn't seen since 1990, some of them even, and running into them day after day and catching up with them and finding out day after day that many of them were divorced or getting divorced, or their marriages were struggling. And he was still married, and so they started asking, the ones that were troubled were asking him for marital advice, and he didn't really know what to say, so he asked me, are all my buddies are getting divorced, and he asked me, is there something challenging, is there something tough about living with a firefighter, because he didn't think there was. And I said, yes, you bet there is. And but at this point, we'd been married 24 years. And so he just asked me, well, do you have some ideas on this? And I said, oh, yeah, 24 years of marriage, 12 years ago. Now it's 36 years. But he said, well, write some down so that I can give advice next time I'm asked. And he was expecting just a little tiny piece of paper, worth of notes. And instead he was handed a 10-page typed annotated document. I said, these are the challenges of living with a firefighter. And he said, oh, wow. And that's
some of us may be harder to live with than others, so understand. Some of you might only have a 5-page document, but mine was 10 plus.
10 pages. Yeah. And so that's kind of what got us going, was the firefighter who might not see some of the challenges asking the spouse. And so that's what got us here. And I really thought about it and things that I've observed over many years of marriage. When we got married, he was not a firefighter. We actually met in college, and he was heading towards a computer degree, and things changed. So I knew him pretty well before. We were married about 5 years before he went and got on with Seattle Fire. And I noticed changes, and I noticed things, and I was able to tell that they were job related. But nobody, especially back then, prepares you for that. And it's, I can see it's the job, but what do we do with that? How do we live with this? And so that's how this started, was trying to help others in Seattle Fire kind of maybe be prepared beforehand for what you're going to face. So,
well, and it was heartbreaking, absolutely gut stomping, heartbreaking to come across these people that I knew from when you go through the difficult challenges of Recruit Academy, and large jobs, so 1,000+ firefighters, you can go your whole career, and there'll be a percentage of the department that you not only don't know, you don't even meet them, you never even talk to them once. It's just guys spread all over the place. But I knew a lot of these folks, and they're every bit as good of people as myself, as Ann. I knew their spouses, their kids, really good folks, and obviously doing an honorable career, serving people and serving the citizens of Seattle. And I mean, it was devastating that again and again and again, yeah, we're split up. Yeah, we're in court. Yeah, we're fighting over the kids, or I may be going to jail because allegations of this and that. Absolutely heartbreaking to watch really cool people and the single biggest commitment of their life being devastated and destroyed. So it came from a source of deep grief asking that question. And fortunately, I think Ann had some substantive answers.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. That's one of the reasons that it led us into working with first responders. We just started to hear over and over again, here's the divorce rate in some of these departments. And it was tragic. I mean, higher than what we had seen in the military work that we'd been doing 10 years prior. So I think you're right. And I think the role of a firefighter and what they're exposed to kind of leads me to the next question. I mean, the exposure to trauma, what does that ultimately do to the soul of a firefighter?
Yeah, again, when I started looking into this, more than 10 years ago, I really thought about, like you said, what is different about this profession than other professions that is probably impacting home. And I researched again, the top divorce rates seem to be military, fire, police, and medical. And so I was looking at, what do those have in common? And they pretty much, except for medical, our military, our police, and fire face danger, which is putting your life on the line. Most people don't, face death when they go to work. Definitely our military, fire, and police do. And exposure to trauma, trauma just means witnessing human suffering, witnessing somebody dying, witnessing all kinds of horrible car accidents and things. And that's what they have in common with the medical, is witnessing trauma. Nobody talked about this stuff, especially not 40 years ago when we started, and not even 10 years ago. What does trauma do to you? And then the third element of this job that's different than others is sleep deprivation, is shift work, working through the night, which also has its own implications. And
Kenny, can you hear me? We lost them. I think
They'll come back.
Yeah, that's a little slow. So, you're back.
So anyway, talking about trauma, danger impacts you physically, having your life threatened with all the adrenaline and things that happen.
Are you guys real quick before you keep going? Are you guys on Wi-Fi?
We're on a hard line.
You're on a hard line. Huh.
Yeah, I've got real solid Wi-Fi signal.
Okay. All right. Well,
sorry about that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Tech, man.
Well, Kenny just said a prayer, so we should be good to go now. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you, brother. Thank you very much. Remember, we're located in Western Washington.
Yeah.
So you got to pray like triple hard. You got to get through that. You got to get through a pretty dark cloud.
All right.
So where would you like me to continue?
I think just start with the trauma and what you've seen in firefighters.
Well, we lost you on danger impacts you physically. That was the last thing we heard.
Okay. And then trauma, again, witnessing suffering impacts you emotionally, and has an impact, like you said, on your soul emotionally. And what I noticed when Mike would have what he would call he called them the tough runs. He never used the word trauma, but when you have that tough run, it technically means you've been traumatized and emotionally impacted, seen something that was next level, horrific, beyond description. And the most common reaction to trauma, ironically, isn't initially sorrow. Initially, it's anger. And the reason for that, as I researched, because anger is a functioning emotion. It gives you energy and the will to try to fight through that situation. And anger is actually a righteous emotion. It comes from the desire to fix something that is wrong and to correct this error, that you shouldn't be seeing this person like this. This is wrong. And anger's good. It gives you the energy. Sorrow is debilitating. And so at an initial traumatic scene, the first responder goes into kind of an anger mode, and we got to get this right. We got to fix it. We got to save this life. But the problem with that is over time, that anger can start to become cumulative and come home and impact the spouse. And I noticed when Mike was particularly irritable, it took me a while to figure it out, to piece it together. It's because he had a tough run and he was carrying it with him, and it wasn't going away, and it would take a little bit of time. And the trouble with a firefighting career, it isn't just 1 year, like for let's say combat. It's for 30 years or more. It's a lifetime of coping with repeated trauma and repeated tough stuff that starts to build up. And Mike even said there came a point where you reach like a saturation level, and that's when you start to like look at retirement, where it's just like, you know what, I can't face one more horrific tough run. They're not all tough. It's just the ones that become personal, that impact you personally, and that's where the emotion, you go from being professionally detached to personal, and those tend to be anything involving a child. Those tend to be the toughest of all, and anything involving a coworker, like let's say another firefighter is injured or killed. Those are two typically the toughest, and I learned to recognize, hey, this one was tough, but it took a while. And again, it starts with that anger and that irritability, and we talk about that more in our class on how to cope with that and recognize it as a spouse a little bit.
Mm.
Yeah, you opened with, what does it do to your soul? I'll just be brief. I think it increasingly makes you need to thicken up, toughen up, distance yourself, diffuse your vision a little bit, so you're not looking at the details, you're not internalizing them as much, and you can see where not only that would impact at work, how you feel about people, your level of compassion and caring is there because you're going out and doing it. But in distancing yourself, you can start to view people as objects, or, less than viewing them as people. And then certainly when you bring that idea home, that whole vibe home, that's a rough, it ends up making for a rough dynamic. And what you're seeing, I really don't know if it's on an uptick or not. I don't know if we're just recognizing it more because we have more social media and we're talking about it more, but a lot more folks in our fields, in the military, police, fire service, EMS, you're seeing a lot more suicide, a lot more taking of lives and violent type of crimes and that type of thing. And I think it finds its outlet from there's nowhere to get relief. You can only drink so much. You can only take so many pills or sleep around so much or do so many drugs or whatever it is that you're doing to kind of deaden that pain. There's only so much of that you can do before it starts damaging everything around you, including your physical health. And a lot of times we're finding that right smack dab in the middle of the home ends up being the genesis for what ends up causing people to take their lives. Yeah. And we were hoping to shine some light on what it is that's different. Why, not just fire. I've been in the military. I've been in the EMS world. I've been in the police world, and the majority of my professional career has been in the fire world. A whole bunch of things that we wrote about apply in all four of those worlds, and it definitely is a challenge. What it is that we're asked to do, bringing it home.
Yeah, as you read that list, I was thinking, man, those are like key qualities for a future partner. I mean, you want them disconnected, hardened, shut off their emotion. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. I mean, like what you're describing is oftentimes the result of why marriage is so hard in this profession, because you do have to put up those walls. You do have to self-protect and turn off the emotion, all those things that go into it. I think one of the thoughts that I had as you were kind of sharing about those hard runs, one of the questions that come up so often with our first responders, especially in the fire side, is like the spouse asking, I need to know more of what's going on in your world. Like, how can I help? How can I be there for you? And I'm just curious from your guys' perspective, there's this fine line between oversharing, but not sharing enough. Where do you fall on that? And what would you say to a firefighter who's dealing with that situation?
Well, first off, let me let her answer that. But if the instinct of the spouse is what you just described, there is a chance that you've got a pretty good spouse. If they actually are interested and engaged enough to say, I want to help you, I want to understand, instead of, hey, your garbage is really impacting us. What you're doing is really bothering us. The way you described it, I mean, you'll hear in Ann's voice, I think, when she talks about things over and over and over again, you're going to hear that I chose very well, because she was interested and engaged and wanted to understand and was willing to give a little bit of ground. And it has really been transformational in us being able to make it.
Well, back to kind of how we got here, I looked at danger, trauma, sleep deprivation, and when we do the class, I start with those to tell the spouse, to remind them, this is what your firefighter is dealing with on a daily basis: danger, trauma, sleep deprivation. And those three things, especially danger and trauma, are the most impactful experience a human being can go through, a near death or trauma. And they go through it repeatedly. So keep that in mind. Some of these things you're seeing are not character flaws. They are definitely the result of danger, trauma, and lack of sleep. So in thinking about that, how do we deal with it? All these random thoughts, and I noticed this, and I saw this, and we fought over this. I started to kind of narrow it down into basically 5 topics. All these things fell into 5 topics that were unique to the firefighter marriage. There's a billion for every marriage, but for the firefighter first responder marriage, there are 5 topics that kept coming to the top, and I call them basically, you need to be able to talk about these 5 areas, and I call them 5 essential conversations every firefighter spouse should have. And one of them is, how do we handle the tough runs? That's one of the conversations. But the first one actually is reentry time. And I'll just kind of start there if you don't mind. Reentry time is the number one conversation, because that is the time when you come back together as a couple after being apart. For any couple, coming back together can be awkward. You kind of had a tough day or whatever. For the firefighter couple, we've been apart the longest. We've been apart more than most couples, 24 hours, sometimes 48 hours. And we noticed that, especially as a young couple, we were fighting right at the door, right as we met, because I wasn't understanding what he had just been dealing with for 24 hours. I was home with the kids. And he was coming from the rock and roll world of firefighting, and I would just pounce on him and want to talk and want to connect. And I missed you. We didn't have cell phones back in the early 90s. Wanted to talk, and he was exhausted and grouchy and up all night, and we would fight, and then we would be mad at each other, and then he'd turn around and go back to work. And then this distance started to grow. And so what I learned to do, and this is just conversation number 1, was to give him re-entry time. Give him a minute to walk in the door, decompress without expecting major conversation right off the bat. Give him a gap, let him take a nap, because he had just been up all night. Whenever I could, I would give him that break. And then later, when he had decompressed a little bit and gears from that intense, emotionally detached world, now he's ready to re-engage with me and get his emotions back and soften up, open up. and then we could talk and connect, and that opened the door to the deeper conversations later. And I can tell you all 5 of them. But if I didn't give him that reentry time, there was a clash. And then later, like I said, he would meet my needs when he was in a better position. And it's interesting that you say we're finding the fire department's tougher on marriages than the military. I just recently taught a class, and a combat soldier who had been in combat in Afghanistan, he said, and he just become a firefighter, he said the fire department was harder on his marriage than the military. And I couldn't believe it. I said, really? He said, yeah. And he said, it's because of that reentry time. He said, in the military or in combat, you stay in that mode and you stay there for a year. In the fire department, you're coming home every day, have a shift, which is, like he said, was like combat. And then you have to come home the next day, and it's tough to shift gears between those two extreme worlds. And so that's why reentry time is really essential, to give your firefighter, your first responder, a chance to shift gears before you expect immediate engagement. And don't be offended that they might have a little trouble first coming home for a few minutes. It's not about you. It's about them trying to shift gears.
Yeah. I have a feeling that Kenny and I are both thinking the same thought here. But Kenny, what's your thoughts on what she just shared?
I'm like, wow, how wise is this woman? One, to figure that out. I mean, because how many couples do we know that didn't figure that out? But the ones that did are still working. I can think of the deployment tempo in the special operations community was insane in the middle of the 2000s. So you had just about every 6 months in the Ranger Regiment, you're going to get redeployed because there's only three battalions. So one's got to be in country the entire time. So they did 6-month cycles. So you'd come home and then you'd train up and you get ready to go again. And what we saw was just what you were talking about was the re-entry. The spouse has been waiting. You're home. Let's engage. Let's connect. And all the soldier wanted to do was just decompress for a second and hold up. 2 days ago, yeah, I was walking through mountains with dudes shooting at me. Hang on, and I'll get to. And it never occurred to me. I didn't even think about the fact that that's a daily, weekly occurrence in the firefighter world. So if you go do a 24, 48-hour shift and you happen to have a tough run and then you got to come home and it's like, hey, let's connect, let's talk, and the things that need to happen, but they don't need to happen right then. They can't happen right then because your headspace isn't right. And I'm fascinated, and that you figured that out, and that you're reciting it as if you've been teaching it all your life. And that's valuable. I wish someone had taught us that.
Right?
Us too.
Well, hey, believe me, brother, we're embarrassed about how much time we wasted figuring it out. Yeah. We were mad at each other a lot of times over this issue, and we spent a lot of time angry at each other that was unnecessary because we didn't know this is kind of what was going on. The firefighter cracked me up. That's the combat veteran. He said, "Yeah, it wasn't like it was easy over in Afghanistan. It wasn't. It was one of the most challenging things I've ever done. But now I come home from work and it's like, oh, somebody here actually wants me to talk to them." And we just laughed out loud. It's like, yeah, your spouse probably is going to want that. You bet.
So my question, Kenny and I, we both have little ones running around. How do you deal with that? If I'm a firefighter, I'm listening to this and I'm coming off a shift. Yeah, I can communicate that with my partner, but man, there's little ones that they want to jump right into the thick of it. How did you guys deal with that?
Yeah, we had little ones. He started in 1990, and our boys were 2 and 3 years old. And so they don't always understand reentry time and dad needs a minute. I guess that's why it's really important that the spouse does understand it and doesn't add to that, because the little kids aren't going to wait, but the spouse can wait. And I helped alleviate some of that burden by not expecting it as well as the little kids. But I would try to, like I said, I guess the first lesson I learned was the Christmas tree incident, as I tell it in the class, was expecting him to not only engage with me, but the kids, and walk right out the door and go get a Christmas tree first thing, after not really being emotionally ready for it. So I learned to try to, even as I could, put off events or walking right out the door first thing, maybe do it the next day, put off the Christmas tree the next day, try to schedule some of those events when the kids are too little to understand, to not pounce, maybe schedule later in the day, or as much as you can take off some of that pressure, because the little kids, they don't understand. And the reentry time, again, if I could in any way, shape, or form run screen a little bit for Dad, I would. And of course, as a father, he just, like he says, he just had to do it. You know, you can't blame them that you're tired and grouchy. But maybe that's something to talk about as a couple. What can we do to help with your reentry time so that you're not harsh or grouchy with the kids? What can we do? What can we prepare ahead of time? Mike learned to try to have a nice slow drive or a gentle drive so he'd be better with the kids, those kinds of things.
Yeah, the way she structured this, and when you get into the book, I think it's one of the brilliant things that she did. There's so much stuff that could have been written about. Marriage is vast, and all the variables are different. Even the three of us sitting here, different situations, marital situations, different personalities, lots of stuff about us is different. The conversation is the important part of this. We could give you like 5 or 10 or 15 things that we did. We can even tell you some things that other folks have done, that to try to navigate it. The important point is to recognize we've got to have, as a couple, this conversation about that meeting at the door, however it happens. Some folks, the spouse is sitting with kids for the last 24 or 48 hours, and they're about to go nuts because, they've been the demands of that. Some are getting ready to go to their own jobs. They're both firefighters, or they're both in the military, or they're going to an emergency room. The variables are vast. The point is to have the conversation and recognize this reentry time is a real thing. And if we don't sort it out some way, somehow, we're going to keep crashing and crashing and crashing. And eventually things get said that you're going to regret, things get done that you're going to regret, and you're going to waste a whole lot of time. And very important, and we're trying to talk quick because I know we got a compressed time frame here. Really important, everything is reciprocal. Every single thing we talk about in the conversations is reciprocal. It is not a case, you spouses out there, that, oh, your hero firefighter, your hero soldier is coming home, and what's wrong with you that you aren't willing to do whatever's necessary to take care of them? I'm glad that our spouses feel like they want to take care of their hero firefighter or their hero soldier. However, it's all reciprocal, man. I mean, look, I don't know the dynamics of your audience, so we speak to all different crowds, but our story, I can tell you, Ann and I, before God, on our knees, committed our lives to love each other to eternity. That's what we committed to, and it was a sacred vow to a God that we believe in as much as we're talking to you right now. That's big stuff, man. That's not a joke. That's not a simple commitment. That commitment meant that not only is Ann looking to find ways to make that reentry time easier for me, but I also am trying to give her the same thing in a break from the kids, in the break from her job. When she comes home from teaching school or doing whatever, there's a gap that's provided for her. It's the idea that you're getting on each other's side, you're serving each other, and you're looking for ways to make it happen. Here's the problem. Rock and roll world transitioning back to home. That's a challenging transition. How do we, given our circumstances, how do we make that an easier thing for both of us?
Yeah, it's true. And I think a lot of people miss this and they end up taking on challenging situations that are not necessarily needed. The other thing that comes to mind is, this idea of detachment I mean, temporary detachment that is required in your profession can sometimes be taken on as and viewed by the partner as relational apathy. Like they're just not into our relationship, our marriage. And I've heard that often come up in conversations. How would you agree with that? And if so, what would you say is probably important for that spouse to understand?
Yeah, well, reentry time helps with that. Give them that gap to shift gears because they, like you said, they have to be detached at work. The next conversation, it kind of falls into that category, and I call it dealing with harshness and gallows humor. Reentry time helps with that shift a little bit, but that's also something else I noticed coming home was, again, that emotional detachment, which becomes, I would call it harshness, a way of speaking in that world that works. When you're in life and death situations, you can't talk in soft, kind, flowery language or even in a soft, kind tone. There has to be an abrupt, terse tone and direct speech and barking orders, and that all works in that world. But I noticed it coming home, and that's why this is an important conversation, because in an interpersonal connection, there needs to be tenderness and kindness and emotional connection, and so we've had to have that conversation. And I would just encourage spouses to say, find a way to communicate that ahead of time so that you're not fighting in the moment, and then come up with your own little phrases like warning, we are proceeding towards danger. So I would say, when I noticed him getting harsh, I would just remind him and say, whoa, 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 I'm not a firefighter. And that means
danger.
You're starting to treat me like one or speak to me like one. I'm not a firefighter. That means, remember, I'm your wife. I'm tender-hearted. I need tender conversation. I need tender words. And I've had to convey that to him many, many times. Words are very powerful to me, and especially his words, most of all, because I've given him my heart. I'm trusting him with my heart. And if they come across it, and it's not so much even what he says, it's how he's saying it. If it comes across as harsh, it's going to start to do damage to me, and I will start to withdraw and not want to talk to him. So we just learned to say, hey, whoa, whoa, I'm not a firefighter. And that reminds him that, oh, gosh, I brought it home with me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. And instead of me getting mad or withdrawing, he would thank me and say, thank you for reminding me. I don't want you to withdraw from me. I want things to be close and intimate and to stay connected. So that's, again, it's a conversation. Every couple's a little bit different. But words are very powerful to me, especially, and choose them wisely. The other element of the fire department, I'm sure it's true in all first responders, it's also the humor, and I call it gallows humor. And it's the ability to deal with death. You have to develop a sense of humor and laugh about it. It gives you courage, gives you strength. But that type of humor also doesn't work on me. Or finding a weakness in your fellow firefighter and exploiting that weakness and laughing. And that doesn't work on me either. And so that's all kind of part of that mentality that is tough on a marriage. And we've had to have that conversation that, that doesn't work. But what helps also is to include your fire spouse as much as you can with the stories behind some of the humor, so that I've learned to laugh at his stories too. If he keeps it all from me, it starts to seem kind of twisted and weird and dark. But if he shares it with me a little bit, takes the time, now I understand it, and I'm laughing at some of his dark stories as well. So again, it's a conversation. How do we handle this harshness? How do we get it out of the house as needed?
And what a valuable story to share, that, because you're right. And people don't get, I think you have to have that humor as the release valve, because if you treated everything as serious as it really was, you would implode. So you need that relief valve but when you come home, people don't don't quite get that. And what a great thing to share, because if you don't have the conversation ahead of time, and then that you don't understand, well, this is how that we talk at work. This is and why we do that. It will affect you. I saw it in my marriage. She began to withdraw because she didn't understand why I was. Yeah. That's just not the way it's supposed to. That's not right. You can't talk like that about humans. And you're like, well, it's just And then what ends up happening is you'll see a lot of veterans, firefighters, particularly. You'll hear that. Well, they don't really talk about it. Why don't they talk about it? I don't know. Have you ever tried to talk? Because you can't speak a common language, and so they know that darkness of what they do doesn't translate into the tenderness and intimacy of a marriage. So they just shut up about it, and they keep it inside. And then there again, where's the release and the reef valve? Because what's kept inside and compartmentalized will eventually find its way out and manifest itself in an unhealthy way. All that I just said just to get to that point. But that was a great piece of wisdom.
Well, one of the important things is you do not have to share the gory details. You just don't. You don't have to go into specific detail about the things that are going to keep you awake for the rest of your life. That's not important. But what you do have to do is find a common language and find a way to share with your spouse, boy, we just had a really difficult one last night. It was a little kid and it was just terrible. That's really all the spouse needs to know. I need to kick into a little bit different mode here. They didn't just go to 5 false alarms last night and they're tired because they're just tired. They went to something that for any human being is difficult to witness and see. And everybody navigates that a little bit differently. But at least now the spouse knows, okay, I'm operating in a different world here, and I need to tread a little bit lightly or give a little more grace or whatever it is that helps their spouse deal with that better. That's the guts of the conversation. You find that stuff out. You find your language. Like she said, you find your phrases. What's the danger phrase? That when that phrase comes up, it means nothing to you two. She could say that to you. Well, hey, wait, I'm not a firefighter. And you would go, oh, okay, whatever. When I hear that, I know from experience, we're about to get into a throwdown because I have started to cross the line, and it prompts me, I need to check myself and step back or get ready for the couch. If you're that determined, to have the fight, get ready for the couch,
Yeah. Being aware of that moment, though, too, Mike, and being able to, I call it the 0 to 60. You start feeling it, and sometimes that's a hard one to throttle back on. And having that ability, I think, goes back to being willing to have the conversations. And some of the stuff that Noel teaches in the whole Oxygen program is to recognize when that's happening and to create those, hey, danger, danger phrases. But it also takes some discipline on your behalf to recognize, instead of just pushing, like Noel and I, we giggle one time. We were talking to a young soldier, and they were getting into those moments. I'm like, well, did you guys come up with a phrase that kind of signal? He goes, yeah, I told her she needs to man up.
Yeah.
I'm like, how'd that work out, buddy?
That'll work.
So he didn't quite get the part about throttling back yet. So and recognizing, I think so. No, I know you got a ton of questions, but I want to touch on something that you guys started talking about a little bit ago and ask a question of. You talk about, we got down on our knees, we made a promise, we made a commitment, and we believe in a God as real as we're all sitting and talking. And that's a big deal. It is a big deal. And So the question I want to ask is, we know that firefighting is challenging. We know that deployments are challenging. We know that police officers have a challenge. It's challenging at the marriage. So the question is, what do we all fight for? Is it the who, what, when, where? It's the why. Why should I take that hill? Well, it's important because why should we do all of this hard work to save a marriage when it's just as easy to punch out? It's a lot easier to punch out. Why should we do the hard work of this?
Well, when you look at the book cover, if you decide to get the book, what you see there is purposeful. Everything about that was done for a reason. What you see there is two, at the time, 20-year-old kids on their knees before God, committing our lives to each other. That's the actual picture of us. Man, we didn't have a clue. We had no money. We had very little backing. We had, all we knew is we loved each other. We loved God. We wanted to form a life together. And what you see all around us is all the different things, or many of them, that the fire service brought into our life that are both good, but that also absolutely warred against that commitment. That's the whole point. The reason why that picture is at the center of the book is because we made that commitment to God. That's the first thing. Understanding that God is first. Now with that in place, the very first thing for us in our life and our world is that relationship. Everything else, and I don't want to overstate it, it's not an idol. It's not an idol that we worship and nothing else happens but that. But everything else is filtered through that commitment that we made to each other, to love each other, to take care of each other, to look out for each other. Let the wind blow, baby. Let the storms come. We are going to stand together. And, I'll let Ann pick it up. The simplest thing I can tell you is I'm really proud of a lot of things I've done in life. I really am. And I've worked hard to try to do life in the right way, warts and all. I'm not proud of everything, but I'm really proud of the accomplishments. There's not one single thing I'm prouder of in a human sense in the fact that Ann and I have decided to write a love story together, and we're staying at it. The life that we've created together, the warts, the bumps, the bruises, the scars, the dumb things we've done, the failures, the heartbreaks, are all also interconnected with two very fallen and sinful kids who have our own selfishness and our own weakness and our own stuff, have decided to write a story together that is not easy to do, but that's absolutely glorious. And we're excited about the idea of what the rest of life holds, and we're excited about this phase of life and the things we get to do. But man, we loved being newlyweds. We loved having little kids. We loved it when we got to older kids and in the teen years, and then up into college, and now they're doing their own thing, and we loved every part of that. It was all part of writing our story. And before God, trying to present a couple that is fallible, and you can find plenty of things to pick apart in the way we've done life, plenty of them. But what you can't pick apart is that we have decided to write a story together that we, in our ways, is honoring to God and showing what I believe God wanted marriage to look like.
And that's the fifth conversation and what helped us to do that was honoring that commitment by putting our first family first. With the fire service, you have the privilege of having two families because these life or death professions become as a brother sisterhood that most other professions can't understand. When you put your life in the hands of your fellow soldier or cop or firefighter, you form a very tight bond, and it is like family. And we had to deliberately choose along the way to remember, even amongst that bond, our bond was tighter still. And we had to keep that first, and we had to keep it purposeful because it's very easy to slip into the second family and start to elevate that and feature that over your marriage, over your first family. And that's it's a balancing act. It's a scale. Because he, as much as he wanted to sacrifice for the community and for the fire service, if he went too far, he was starting to sacrifice me. And we were not willing to do that because of our commitment to each other, to the Lord. It was something sacred, and you have to choose that. You have to put it first in your heart, and everything else, like in the picture, is second. and to keep that central relationship inviolate, sacred, separate. Even the children have, in our opinion, needed to be second to our marriage. And so they were part of the first family, but even amongst family, keep your first relationship first, which was us, then the kids, and then the second family. And that's a choice. And that's kind of boils down to time management. That is how you indicate what's number one is your time. Giving too much time to these honorable professions, you're going to lose time at home. And that's how we balanced it. We learned to say, I'm starting to feel distance growing. We need to sit down and see what needs to go on the calendar because I need a little more time. I need a little more focus. I'm starting to feel second. And the minute I started to feel second, I would get jealous and start to resent the fire service. But if he would take the time, remind me, nope, you're number one, then I'm right back on board. I love the fire service. I'm not jealous. So that's part of that, keeping that sacred vow. And for us, it was sacred. I think that's where faith really helps, is that even though these are honorable professions, they are still second to our number one commitment, which is honoring our marriage before the Lord.
Yeah.
I'll tell you guys,
I appreciate
you're all doing wonderful things. I've read a little bit about what you guys are doing and about who you are and the things you've done. And all of that stuff comes to an end one day, every bit of it. And in our class, we have a picture, because we talk a lot about the fire service. We have a picture of my coat hanging on the hook at my firehouse. And it's literally, guys, the last 15 seconds of a 33-year career spent going to fires, in firehouses, getting on fire trucks, going to fires. And I've done other things, but that moment was the end of that chapter. At least I think it is. It was a poignant moment. It was an emotional moment. It doesn't mean anything to anybody but me, but it was an incredibly dramatic moment for me. And I walked out of the firehouse. I got in my car, and the fire department essentially was done. And here's how important I was to Seattle Fire after 30 plus years of giving it a pretty good go, giving it a good amount of time, effort, and energy. Literally, the last day I worked, I was already kicked out of the email system, the city email system, and I couldn't even log on to my own rig. They had already booted me out of the system for all the administrative stuff and whatever. That's how important you are to the machine. What I'm saying is the machine keeps going. It's next man up. Someone's going to take your spot, and it's a just thing. It's a right thing. The fires are still going to happen, and they're probably glad you were there. There's a lot of people that will appreciate what you did, but trust me, they're going to move on from you the second you leave. What a tragedy to serve that career, to give your time to that career, and if you do it in the wrong way, to go home to an empty house. Now, see, I was sad when I walked out of the doors of Seattle Fire. I was sad. I was sad to see it end. It was the right time. It was a good time to go, but I was sad that it was over because it meant so much to me. I can't even imagine what it would have been like to not now go home and come into the arms of my wife and, saying, good job, it's okay. And we got a lot of other really wonderful things we're going to do. You have 24 hours in a day. You have the same amount of time, you people that are listening. You have the same amount of time we do. You have different variables, but we all have our stuff we have to do. We could follow you around for a week with a video camera, and we could determine what your priorities are in life by two kind of primary things. There's others, but where you spend your money and where you spend your time gives a really good indication of what your actual priorities are versus the priorities you post on Facebook or, the ones you say at church or the one you say at the social club. Where your time and where your treasure goes, those two things you can only spend once. If you'll just sit down and evaluate, where is our precious time that we don't get it back? You got X amount of heartbeats and then it's over. Where are we putting that? And is it in line with the actual priorities we say are important to us? I mean, I'm probably not going to ever be a good marriage counselor, guys, because I'm pretty direct on this stuff. A couple buddies of mine working themselves like dogs at Seattle Fire. Well, one of them in particular, I can remember looking him in the eyes, and he looked like death warmed over. I said, bro, man, are you all right? And he said, oh, man, just so much overtime. And I said, well, that's easy. Don't sign up. stop. We like the money. We like the money. We like the toys. I just bought a new jet ski, and here pretty soon we're going to get a 2-week break, and we're going to go ride the jet ski. And again, maybe I'm not the easiest marriage counselor guy, but I said to him, how good is the jet ski going to be, brother, when some other dude is riding it? And guess what the punchline is? Some other dude is riding that guy's jet ski because home got distant. They were ships that passed in the night. They had all the money in the world, but it didn't matter because that first relationship did not take priority. I'm telling you, friends, your kids are going to grow up and they're going to leave. They're going to get their own lives and they're going to leave. If everything you are is invested in your kids and your relationship to them, and I mean, we love our kids and we had a blast with them, man. It wasn't like they were kicked off to the curb with, a bunch of pencils, to sell. We had a blast with them, but they never were allowed to dominate or come between the relationship that we had together. And I feel that way about our profession. You have to be honorable in your profession. You have to earn a living. You have to give good bang for the buck, all those types of things. That can be done without sacrificing or having that dominate the relationship that you have. We did everything wrong by today's standards, guys. We're successful, but we did everything wrong by what is the standards. We got married young. We had kids young. We committed to having one income. We've made it on one income the whole time so that we could raise our own kids and have time for each other. I'm telling you, whatever your variables are, you can make it, but you do have to make sure that first things come first. And in a lot of relationships, if you have an honest conversation about what is actually your priorities, I truly believe you'll see that there's some things that are out of whack.
Yeah, I appreciate
Mike. You just summed that up. Unless you have an eloquent way to say this, Noel, I've been writing things down as you guys talk because there's just some invaluable information. But more important, the reason I'm writing it down is it's like great minds think alike, ours too. But I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these are the same things that we're telling people, and you guys are living it, and you're saying it's a choice. This commitment to one another is a choice. The hard times, that's when we need you to step up, and that's a choice you make. You made a commitment. Okay, we're going to put our faith first. We're going to put each other next, the marriage, and then anything, even the kids come second to that, and then our secondary families come after that. We do not let something drive a wedge between us. And it's as simple as that's a choice to make. If you asked anybody why you put your life on the line, in the end, the answer would be, it wasn't for the flag, it wasn't for the job, it wasn't for the glory of Seattle fire, it was for each other. I put my life in the line of fire for the person on my left and on my right. When you come home to your marriage, that is a choice. We fight the good fight for each other. And I just have seen, the whole point of this is because we see people punching out. You came home and you were willing to put your life on the line over here, but you came home and you just couldn't figure out a way to make it a priority, as you just said, Mike, to fight for each other. And I just, in its basic, simple sense, that's what you guys have done. And then you come up with all kinds of very eloquent life lessons, but really it was you made a choice. So God bless you. There you go.
That was eloquent. That was eloquent. And I will just add that, you put that stuff in order. You put us out of business. You literally, we won't have to teach these classes anymore if that stuff was to truly work itself out. I know there's dynamics and there's all kinds of complexity that comes into that, but it's well said. And I appreciate you guys kind of sharing here's the main story, right? If you stick to this story, things are going to work themselves out. Here's the reality. There was so many questions that we had for Mike and Ann and such little amount of time to get them done The good news for you all that are listening right now is they're all contained in their book. So go buy their book, and you're going to, and I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about you guys. I mean, when we got into the space of working with first responders, I started looking at, well, who's written stuff on this for the firefighter, for the police? And there's not a lot out there. I mean, like you do an Amazon search, you're going to get a lot of marriage books, but not specific to the firefighter. And so I would just encourage you guys, pick up their book because they go into the nuances of the profession. And then how do you make sense of that in your marriage? Well done, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We are out of time in terms of this. So we might have to do a sequel, a part 2 to the Mike and Ann story and what's contained in your guys' book. But I really do appreciate you guys coming on and sharing this perspective because it's needed. It really is needed. So